Good afternoon. I'm going to give you a very short introduction to how social media can be used to enhance your research and to communicate about your findings and how it can actually be an effective use of your time. I'm doing this partly in response to people who say to me, I don't have time for social media. Is it not a waste of time? Do you not get loads and loads of cluttering up your feed? Is it not a distraction? I would say that actually using social media strategically can be of great benefit. And I hope that as you listen to this, you'll start to see things a bit differently. But I'm going to really touch on why, what's the point? What options are there? When might you be able to do this? Where is it appropriate to use social media? And then finally, a little bit on the how, some basic do's and don'ts to get you started. So you might wonder why. What is the point? Well, it can be quite an effective way of communicating about your research. So the first time I gave a presentation like this was at the World Conference of Pharmacology in Glasgow in July 2023. And I was asked to give a short presentation, so I put some information about it on two social media platforms. Firstly, Twitter, now known as X on the left-hand side, and LinkedIn on the right-hand side. And so you can see the post here, but you can also track metrics. It's a bit more difficult with Twitter these days, but it's quite a useful way of seeing how many people read your tweet or respond to it. And actually, they can go quite a long way. So my top tweet of that week, or that month even, was about this presentation. And then you can start to see actually some more of the engagements, how many likes, how many people click through, what people do with it. And similarly on LinkedIn on the right-hand side, you can see similar metrics. But what options are there? The fact is there are quite a number of different platforms that are available. And one of the first things you might want to do is to make a social media strategy. So by that, I mean you stop and you think, what is it I'm trying to achieve here? Who am I trying to reach? And what platforms will help me achieve my purpose? There are many, but the two that I find best suit my purposes and the purposes of the groups that I lead are a combination of Twitter or X and LinkedIn. They seem to be quite complementary and they work in quite different ways. So Twitter is very immediate. You tend to have very short messages that you can tag a few people in, and you can summarize events and activities in real time. It's very fast. Whereas LinkedIn is much more professional, it's more corporate. Many industry partners and organizations have LinkedIn accounts. You can write more, you can be more measured. So you would tend to use that perhaps more for a summary. But what I found is that using both platforms, I have a wide range of individuals reaching out to me to find out more about our research, to ask for ideas to do with mentorship and collaboration. And it's actually been very fruitful and a very positive experience. But you might then ask the question of, well, when can I actually do this? Many of us in academia are extremely busy, and the thought of adding one more task might just seem quite burdensome. But for me, the way I use it is I use it as a short break from another task. I try to incorporate it into my routine as a little bit of a habit. So if I'm ever at a meeting or an event and I want to put out a tweet, it actually helps me focus, because I think, what is the one key take-home point that I want to share about this meeting or event? When can you do it? Well, think of the times in the day when you're taking a breather. Maybe it's the times when you're waiting for a bus, or maybe you're on a train, or depending what country you're in, maybe you're stuck in traffic. Maybe you're waiting for a meeting to start. Maybe you are sitting in a talk and you're trying to focus your mind and almost make notes. So you can use social media for all of these things, waiting for the kettle to boil. But where is it actually appropriate to use social media? Well, of course, there are going to be times when it's not appropriate. There are going to be times when things are confidential, or results are under embargo, or there may be subject matter that is quite sensitive, perhaps politically charged. And in those situations, you might think, actually, maybe I shouldn't use social media here. Because the thing is with social media, not to frighten anybody, but it's out there. and it's quite permanent. I often say to people, don't say anything on social media that you would not be happy to say to your parents, your pastor, or your boss. Don't say anything that you think is inflammatory or controversial. And if you're in doubt, perhaps store that thought and reflect on it. But actually, there are a wide range of places where social media is really important. As a researcher, how often do you really engage with communities or decision-making stakeholders, policymakers, other NGOs that might be interested in your area? There actually are many people that might be interested in your work, but that might never take time to read the detail of your paper. And particularly if your research is quite technical, you might find you need to find ways of simplifying your results, putting it into lay language, putting it into a form so that people can understand what you do and why it matters. And these are the kind of groups that I try to engage with on social media. And I found that very productive. It's also a very useful exercise yourself to think, how do I explain this in a way that is simple, clear, and understandable? So these are just some of the groups of individuals that you might target. When you first set up your account on social media, you can choose to follow certain individuals or organizations. And this is where I think it's quite key. I only choose to follow people or organizations that are directly relevant to my purpose. So it's always keeping that purpose in mind. So maybe how would you get started? We can, in other places, we can talk about exactly how to set up your account and how to set it up. But here are some simple do's and don'ts. Firstly, I would always recommend setting up an authentic profile. Do use your real name. You're a professional and you've got nothing to hide. And add a relevant photo. You want to be relatable, but at the same time, you have to remember that when you're using social media in research or in a professional context, you're actually marketing a product. And that product is you or your research or your team. I've mentioned several times, but repetition is emphasis. You need to find your voice. You need to find what your purpose is. So developing a social media strategy can be a very useful thing to do, but that can sound quite formal and cumbersome. I suppose what you want to know is, why are you using it? Who do you want to reach? What do you want to be known as? Are there certain things that you want to tweet about, or are there certain things that you don't? Often we advise people to lurk for a while, watch and see other accounts, see what you like, and also see what you don't like. And you'll start to decide, actually, I want to be known as a person who always has something positive and productive to say about my work, perhaps, always brings a fresh angle, is keen to collaborate, but you don't want to be known as a person that's always complaining, always got negative and political things to say and so forth. Do follow those key individuals and organizations and decide which platforms work best for your purpose. As I've mentioned, I tend to use Twitter and LinkedIn, but when we're engaging with communities, we're doing more on Instagram and YouTube, and we're starting to use film more. People have suggested to me using TikTok, and I'm not ruling that out, but I do think I need to get familiar with that platform. And there are some things that you mustn't do. Again, remember your purpose. Do you ever want to get personal on social media? There may be times when you do. For example, one of my purposes is to communicate about life-work balance and diversity in scientific careers. And so for that reason, I sometimes do share things about my life-work balance and how I make it work. But that's still intrinsic to my purpose. I don't share personal details about my life when they're not relevant. And along that line, don't get distracted by rabbit holes and needless arguments. Depending on which accounts you follow, you'll see that there are certain individuals who just love to complain and argue. It's not the right place for that. Nuance is entirely lost. Things you say might be taken out of context. And the fact is, you're arguing with a stranger a lot of the time. Don't waste your time. I've already mentioned this, but don't ever say something you'd be uncomfortable saying to the people in leadership over you in the different domains of your life. Never respond in anger, and beware of using social media late at night when you're tired or emotional. And of course, do remember to tag your funders, your organisations and your colleagues. I like to make social media a celebration of positivity and all that is good about academic research, all that is good about understanding pharmacology in complex and understudied populations. And I want to get out there and help to attain equity of access to research. So in all things, be driven by your purpose, be positive, and finally, make sure that you have some fun. You will notice that the Dolphin 3 accounts are just getting started, so please do follow us, and I look forward to the engagement. Thank you very much.